Where's my book? What is it? Irritably, Duncan first considered simply continuing on without his companion. Then he came to a halt, giving the tall dwarf time to catch up. The tall dwarf made no answer, made no move. However, so finally, with the exasperated expression, Duncan turned and stomped back. To Reorx's beard, Karas, he growled. What is it? I think you should meet with Fireforge, Karas said slowly, his eyes on the sky that was now deepening to purple. Stay away from the sky. Far above, a single bright star sparkled in the darkness. I have nothing to say to him, Duncan said shortly. The Thane is wise. Karas spoke the ritual words with a bow, but he accompanied it with a heavy sigh, clasping his hands behind his back. Let's see, so Karas, the way that they're spelling this, here, check this out. This is weird. So K is handing, H is trading, A is carrying. ARA altogether basically means cared about the heading, and then S is measuring what's entering the body. It's seen as like a Dead Sea Scroll, so it's like marking everything that enters a body. Okay, so by Reorx's beard, Karas, he growled. What is it? I think you should meet with Fireforge, Karas said slowly, his eyes on the sky that was now deepening to purple, blah, blah, blah. Far above, a single bright star sparkled in the darkness. Is that like the sun I made a song about last night? I have nothing to say to him, Duncan said shortly. The Thane is wise. The Thane. What does that mean? Is that like a gathering of dwarves, maybe? Gathering of dwarves? A Thane? I think so. A Thane. Huh. The word kind of means who will marry me or who will trade with me. Karas spoke the ritual words with a bow, but I already read this. But he accompanied it with a heavy sigh, clasping the hands behind his back. Duncan exploded. So is it suggesting that they're doing something illegal? Duncan exploded. What do you mean to say is, the Thane's a stupid ass? The king poked Karas in the arm. Isn't that nearer the mark? Karas turned his head, smiling, stroking the silken tresses of his long, curling beard that shone in the light of the torches being lit upon the walls. He started to reply, but the air was suddenly filled with noise, the ringing of boots, the stamping of feet and calling of voices. I'm not crying now. The clash of axes against steel, this changing all the watch. So clashes of axes against steel means rejecting, not being there with everything. And, or rejecting former lovers, maybe too. The changing of the watch. Captains shouted commands. Men lifted their positions. Others took them over. Karas, observing this in silence, used it as a meaningful backing for his statement when he finally did speak. I think you should listen to what he has to say to you, Thane Duncan, Karas said simply. There is talk that you are goading our cousins into war. Me? Duncan roared in a rage. Am I goading them into war? They're the ones who are on the march, swarming down out on their hills like rats. It was they who left the mountain. We never asked them to abandon their ancestral home. But no, in their stiff-necked pride, he sputtered on, relating a long history of wrongs, being justified and imagined. I am reading the War of the Twins. The cover fell off. That's sad. It's Dragonlance. The Legends Trilogy, Book 2. But you kind of have to catch up by watching the video, How Kryn is America and stuff like that, to kind of understand why it's so wow. But so they're the ones who on the mud, blah blah blah. We never asked them, blah blah blah. He sputtered on, relating a long history of wrongs, both justified and imagined. Karas allowed him to talk, waiting patiently until Duncan had blown off most of his anger. Then the tall dwarf said patiently, It will cost you nothing to listen, Thane, and might buy us great gains in the long run. Other eyes than those of our cousins are watching. You may be certain. Duncan growled, but he kept silent, thinking. Contrary to what he had accused Karas of thinking, King Duncan was not a stupid dwarf, nor did Karas consider him such. Quite the contrary. One of the 7 Thanes ruled the 7 clans of the Dwarven Kingdom. Duncan had managed to ally the other Thanedoms under his leadership, giving the dwarves of Thorbarden a king for the first time in centuries. Even the Delwar acknowledged Duncan their leader, albeit reluctantly. That's funny, they call them the Delwar dwarves. That's loud. So that would mean, like, what's war? What's war? It's like it's asking a question of what it's like to flop with everything with the letter W. The Delwar, or so-called dark dwarves, dwelt far beneath the ground, in dimly lit, foul-smelling caves that even the mountain dwarves hesitated to enter. Long ago, a trace of insanity had shown up in this particular clan, causing them to be shunned by the others. Now, after centuries of inbreeding forced upon them by isolation, the insanity was more pronounced, while those judged sane were an embittered, dour lot. But they had their uses as well. Quick to anger, ferocious killers who took pleasure in killing. They were a valued part of the Thane's army. Duncan treated them well for that reason, and because at heart he was a kind and just dwarf, but he was smart enough not to turn his back on them. Likewise, Duncan was smart enough to consider the wisdom of Caras's words. Other eyes will be watching. That was true enough. He cast a glance back to the west, this time a wary one. The elves wanted no trouble, of that he was certain. Nevertheless, if they thought the dwarves likely to provoke a war, they would act swiftly to protect their homeland. Turning, he looked to the north. Rumor had it that the warlike plainsmen of Abanachia that's funny because that name is like Wyoming, because of the location is kind of like Wyoming. The location is kind of like Wyoming, and that has different drinking laws. So here's a word right here, but it's a sin, and then the sin has been spread around, or was spread around, and it's remember the care about it. Isn't that word? We're considering an alliance with the hill dwarves, whom they had allowed to camp upon their lands. In fact, for all Duncan knew, this alliance could have already been made. At least if he talked to this hill dwarf, Fireforge, he might find out. Then, too, there were darker rumors still. Rumors of an army marching from the shattered lands of Solamnia. An army led by a powerful black-robed wizard. Very well, King Duncan snarled, with no good grace. You have won again, Caras. Tell the hill dwarf I will meet him in the Hall of Thanes at the next watch. See if you can dredge up representatives from the other Thanes. We'll do this above board, since that's what you recommend. Smiling, Caras bowed, his long beard nearly sweeping the tops of his boots. With a surly nod, Duncan turned and stopped below, his boots ringing out the measure of his displeasure. The other dwarves along the battlements bowed as their king passed, but almost immediately turned back to their watch. Dwarves are an independent lot, loyal to their clans first, and anyone else second. Though all respected Duncan, he was not revered and he knew it. Maintaining his position was a daily struggle. Conversation, briefly interrupted by the passage of the king, renewed almost immediately. These dwarves knew war was coming, were eager for it, in fact. Hearing their deep voices, listening to their talk of battles and fighting, Caras gave another sigh. Turning in the opposite direction, he started off in search of the delegation of hill dwarves, his heart nearly as heavy as his gigantic war hammer he carried. A hammer few other dwarves could even lift. Caras, too, saw war coming. He felt as he had felt once when, as a child, so that would represent feeling a lawsuit coming. Just kidding. He had traveled to the city of Tarsus, so that would be Hollywood, and stood on the beach, watching in wonder as the waves crashed upon the shore. That war was coming seemed as inevitable and unstoppable as the waves themselves. But he was determined to do what he could to try to prevent it. I'm gonna just try to. I'm gonna find out, like, you know, what happened, and I probably just need to. I probably just need to let them know, and they'll probably, tell a bunch of people, and I'll get help. But so I really need to get this video done that is presentable, that would be for Hazel, that just goes like right to the point, and just shares the miraculous synchronicity of the names trying to help me bring her a pre-death funeral. So I don't see them not doing this, because the names of all the things totally align. It's so beautiful. Anyways, so what am I saying here? Okay, so many among the dwarves found this odd, for Crass was the acknowledged hero of his race. As a young dwarf, in his days before the cataclysm, he had been among those who fought the legions of goblins and ogres in the Great Goblin Wars, fomented by the king priest of Istar. So would that be the drug wars, I guess? Kind of. Because the amount of goblins, like I read in the chronicles, that died were like the friends I had that OD'd and stuff. It was a really weird coincidence. That was a time when there was still trust among races, and the way that they wrote it and everything was so weird. If you actually watch the video, sorry, there was a time when there was still distrust or trust among races. Allies of the knights. I know. Nobody will think it's crazy once I get this video. Hopefully in the next couple days it'll be ready. And thankfully, it always helps me when they think I'm crazy or whatever, because as long as they look into it, as long as they try to prove it wrong, it helps me, because they'll go through the, whoa, this is real. Anyways, so that was a time when there was still trust among races. Allies of the knights, the dwarves had gone to their aid when the goblins invaded Slomnia. That means that the Mormons are helping people from Nevada get off of drugs and alcohol. The dwarves and knights fought side by side, and young Karas had been deeply impressed by the knightly code and the measure. The knights, in turn, had been impressed by the young dwarf's fighting skill. Taller and stronger than the others of his race. That means basically he's drank more. Or he's, done more drugs and stuff. Karas welded a huge hammer, and so that means he's more judgmental, that he had made himself. Legend said it was with the god. Reorx's help, and there were countless times he held the field alone until his men could rally behind him to drive off the invaders. For his valor, the knights awarded him the name Karas, which means knight in their language. There was no higher honor they could bestow upon the outsider. When Karas returned home, he found his fame has spread. He could have been the military leader of the dwarves. Indeed, he might have been king himself, but he had no such ambitions. He had been one of Duncan's strongest supporters, and many believed Duncan owed his rise to power in his clan to Caras. But if so, that fact had not poisoned their relationship. The older dwarf and the younger hero became close friends. Duncan's rock-hard practicality keeping Caras's idealism well grounded. That means he pretty much keeps to himself or rejects most things. And then came the cataclysm. In those first terrible years following the shattering of the land, I mean, would that be like the World War II kind of? I don't know. Caras's courage shown as an example to the beleaguering people. He had been the speech that led the Thanes to join together and name Duncan king. The Dwar trusted Caras when they trusted no other. Because of this unification, the dwarves had survived and even managed to thrive. So I just felt like the response was no, it's not World War II. The cataclysm. I mean, you made up the cataclysm, I'm just wondering. I thought it would have anything to do with it, like the author's conscious mind responding to like an atomic bomb or something, you know. So, now Caras was in his prime. He had been married once, but his beloved wife perished during the cataclysm. And dwarves, when they wed for life. There would be no sons bearing his name, for which Caras, contemplating the bleak future he foresaw ahead for the world, was almost thankful. Okay. So I guess that's it for now. So I'll do more tomorrow. So this made me want to update the video that I made of how Kryn is actually America, because I discovered that the dwarves of Thorbarden, or whatever it's called, Pax Tharkus or whatever, that would represent to their subconscious mind Provo and Orem area of Mormons. That's like where it's the most Mormon of all Utah, probably. Well, maybe Brigham City is also like that too, but yeah, it seems that their subconscious mind, they'll it's like that. It's so weird. Okay, cool. Well, come check it out tomorrow. Johnny Appleseed, how are you going? How are you doing? What the heck? This guy said, I farted and pooped and peed and filled the entire bowl after not pooping for the entire month. I can smell my fart through the screen, gang. She is so pretty, I came to this. What? Okay. All right, well, see you tomorrow.